Fed Chair Jay Powell saying he will stay on the central bank's board of governors while a probe continues into renovations at the Fed's headquarters. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent calls that move, quote, a violation of all Federal Reserve norms. Meantime, the nomination of Kevin Warsh to be the next Fed chair, clearing a key procedural hurdle in Congress. All that coming yesterday as the Fed left interest rates unchanged, though there were more dissents than at any time in the past 30-plus years. Joining us right now, Roger Ferguson, former Fed vice chairman and a CNBC contributor. Let's start with the big news, because I think it matters to sort of the larger dynamic on that board, Roger, which is the idea that Jay Powell is going to stay in his role until this investigation, he says, is somehow completed. I don't know what you think that means for the length of his stay. I don't know what you think that means for the dynamic on the board.
So I think for the length of his stay, he doesn't control that. He said he wants this to be, quote, final. And final means that, you know, the investigation is done. They reach a conclusion, and the conclusion that he's innocent. And I don't know how long that's going to take, nor does he. He said something else that's very interesting on the dynamic of the board. He said he wants to keep a low profile. I think he is not interested in becoming an alternative power source, a shadow chair, anything of that sort. He's expressed confidence in Kevin Warsh and Kevin Warsh's ability, and I share that confidence. So I think this is really not an effort to do anything other than maintain independence of the Fed and, frankly, clear his name once and for all so that he can leave and become a private citizen without this hanging over him.
What do you make of Scott Bessent's comments?
I think they were, not surprising, as in I think he's reflecting the views of the president. The president clearly wants Jay Powell to leave. He wants the right to appoint one more governor. I mean, and obviously he and Jay Powell have not seen eye to eye on policy. So I would take that as the expected reaction with the secretary, though he's an independent actor, in this case, I think, reflecting the views of his boss, the president of the United States.
And perhaps the bigger picture is this idea that there's even more dissent on the board than there's ever been in the last 30 years. So Kevin Warsh is walking into a unique situation.
He is walking into a very interesting situation. I thought the three dissents, not around the setting of policy, but around the so-called guidance, the tilt, the bias, that I think is unprecedented. In terms of three presidents saying, we agree with the stance of policy, we don't like with the hint that you gave out there. And it shows the degree of concern about rising existing inflation, which is already sticky, and rising inflationary pressures. And it does say that incoming Chair Warsh is going to have to walk a fine line, because it's pretty clear that he does not have the votes for any immediate action, certainly not lowering rates in the near term.
I certainly understand where Fed Chair Powell, what his feelings are, but it does seem, what you point out, that it does hinge on personal interest in the matter. It was written in a lot of different places that he wants to ensure the independence of the Fed, and I was thinking, that's going to be Kevin Warsh's job right now. But I think, as you just pointed out, Fed Chair Powell is not saying that he's somehow essential to the Fed maintaining its integrity. It has more to do with his own situation. And obviously, I think he feels like, that he was wronged by all the comments from President Trump about, just all of it, the pejoratives and all the stuff that he got, Roger. So I understand. But there are still critics of Jay Powell. And I thought this was a little bit harsh, but we have her on a lot, Judy Shelton. This was her tweet that I saw this morning. This is sort of representative of, I think, what certain critics would say, or what the other side would say. I think we have it. We'll take a look. Here it comes. A Fed chair who honors neither the rule of law nor gentlemanly behavior in turning over the reins, Powell, in his classic pattern, presents himself with phony humility and exalted motives while indulging in petty politics and self-serving objectives. I know, Andrew, it's incendiary. It's a legend in his own.
No, it's laughable, because that's exactly what's happened to him.
Fire with fire. I understand.
Well, there's no alternative. Okay.
Gentlemen, let me be very clear. Andrew, I'm sorry, Joe, I disagree a bit with your characterization. This is not purely personal to Jay Powell. This is the use of the full authority, legal authority of the federal government, which is really powerful, to try to intimidate another official to take policy actions. The president has been very clear that he is unhappy with Powell because he has not cut rates. And the vast majority of people, myself included, maybe others, believe that this focus on cost overruns in a building is a bit of a subterfuge to go after Powell's decision-making around monetary policy. If every time there is an overrun in a building, a construction at a federal site, we have lots of senior officials confronting these sorts of investigations. So we shouldn't pretend that this is something other than what it is.
But it's one of it's among a lot of other things, though, right? And I think we'll leave Judy Shelton out of it. She obviously has some strong opinions. But even when we've had Warshawn or others talking about the management of the Fed in terms, it's a huge organization. It's bloated. How many people are involved? The things that it got involved with under Jay Powell. It's had plenty of independence, and in some cases, it had enough rope to hang itself in terms of the transitory inflation problem and everything. So there's people that have a lot of critics that have a lot of, and I may or may not be one of them, but critics of Jay Powell's tenure. And at this point, that might have been sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. Because, I mean, when you get into the billions for just redoing a building, it's like, may not be criminal, but it's certainly not great management. It just reeks of government largesse.
Well, let me unpack that a little bit, and a number of places where I would disagree. I was with you in thinking that the discussion of transitory was misguided and proved to be wrong. Having said that, I give Chair Powell credit that he saw the error of his ways and moved very quickly to offset the inflation pressure as best he could. And while inflation has not returned to the 2% target, has certainly come down. Secondly, the Fed is a very large place. People talk about mission creep. I want to remind everyone that almost everything the Fed does is being driven by legislation. It is in bank supervision and regulation because of the law. It is in payment system oversight because of the law. They were asked to do a great deal of work in things like mortgage disclosure and consumer protection by Congress because both parties felt in history that the Fed was likely to be the most balanced. So I think it's a little misleading to say, well, the Fed just sort of willy-nilly took it upon itself to expand its mandate. I don't think that's a fair statement.
Took it upon itself to expand its balance sheet. Took it upon itself to expand its balance sheet.
I agree with you on that. It obviously expanded the balance sheet. It expanded at a time when that was the last tool that was necessary to keep us out of a deep recession. I would say, with your point of view, they need a framework for how to reduce the size of the balance sheet. So, I'm not here saying that everything that Powell did is an A+.
Right. I'm not either.
Points of support and points of disagreement there.
I'm not here either way. I'm just saying there is criticism on the other side, and I'm not sure it's the right move. You don't want to slink out of there like with your tail between your legs, but then again, you don't want to be a gadfly and just a fly in the ointment just because you're bitter about the way you were treated either.
I think that's a bit unfair. I don't think that Jay Powell intends to be a gadfly or fly in the ointment. I think he's going to be, a very good governor, continuing to vote the way he thinks is correct. We'll see what happens. I don't expect him to be high profile, making a large number of speeches that.
Well, once he's in the clear with the IG, Roger, maybe that you're saying once that's all laid to rest, then it'll be going.
Can I just say, I think you have to, if you're him, you want to know it's resolve. Probably a piece of paper.
Right.
Look.
Ask Jim Comey. I know.
Well, that's what I was saying. Ask Jim Comey. Here we are a year later with an Instagram picture. And so the point is that if you're him and you're arguing about whether this is petty or it's personal or it's this, you can see, I think, with your own eyes that it's not that. It's that there's a possibility that he could be prosecuted in some way that could be genuinely problematic for him.
Right.
And therefore feels that he needs.
But there's not criminal charges anymore pending. That was dropped.
No,
but I guess they could come back.
And if you heard what Pirro said, if you heard the words that Pirro said, she literally said that she could bring them back.
Right.
So to me, if you're him, you're saying, I am in this seat until you have written some kind of very legalistic letter that says I am 100% in the clear and it cannot be revoked.
I think Andrew is right in terms of what's called for, and the bigger picture. This ultimately is just about trying to pressure the Fed to lower rates. I don't think it's fair to suggest that it's sort of a petty disagreement. This is a pretty serious rate.
But it got very petty, and then I wouldn't blame Jay Powell. I wouldn't blame him.
We've also the president's attempt to fire a governor. That's gone to the Supreme Court to figure out what those terms are. So, this is not an isolated act. It's one of several acts that has to be put in broader context. And I think it's fair to say that Jay Powell is just, looking after his own skin. I think he's speaking directly to what we know is really going on.